Hey everybody, I hope you all are doing well and welcome back. And yes, of course, it is that time of year again, the time when we all discover our inner Irish roots in order to celebrate St. Patrick's Day. So, in that spirit, we are going to be trying probably the most American of Irish whiskeys and more correctly, the most Irish of American bourbons, which is the Kentucky Owl St. Patrick's Day edition in honor of St. Patty, getting rid of all the snakes from Ireland, and because nothing says Happy St. Patrick's Day like a bourbon that has been greenwashed. So, we're going to do a full review on this beauty, which I picked up last year, but I had kind of sort of already forgotten about it until I found it dusting off my BOGO Shamrock Shake coupons. But we'll give it a try, and then we'll give it a score on the nose, on the palate, as well as on the finish, and try to figure out if it's worth the money or just another American dressed up in all green claiming to be Irish on March 17th. Now, before we get to it, if you like these videos, if you like the wanders, if you like the hauls, the reviews, the unbottlings, the unboxings, and really all the great stuff we got cooking up for you, and we got tons of great stuff cooking up for you, don't forget to like and subscribe because it really does help our channel to grow, and we super appreciate that. And also, you get notifications when our newest videos come out on Sundays and sometimes in between. For now, let's get down to the video. All right, so let's get bad boy open and start this review. Make sure to turn the bottle over, get both sides evenly distributed, and see if we can get a pop. Hey, that's a pretty good one. We finally got a good one. And give myself a little bit of juice here. Oh, that looks real nice. Yeah, wow. Look at that. Ooh, I like that. I like that a lot. So check out the color on this. I mean, just immediately you can see that it is a very, very beautiful auburn red color to it. It's got a nice medium viscosity, which is something that I really enjoy. All right, now let's get a little bit of this on the nose. Ooh, and right off the bat, it's a very Irish feel to it. Despite being a bourbon, there's much more of like a subdued, like sweetness to it on the nose than what you would get in like a standard bourbon. Dare I even say it has a heavy Irish influence, which is what you would think by looking at the bottle. But it really seems to be similar to a lot of those like super sweeter Irish whiskeys, maybe like the Red Restless Stout or the PX or even maybe like the Yellow Spot. So, like I mentioned, this Kentucky Owl is a bottle that we had actually bought last year. We got it from Costco, and it had sort of just kind of been sitting around the back of the bar, sort of forgotten about, really, once all the fervor and the excitement from St. Patrick last year ended, and we just didn't open it. Now, the which and the why this bottle exists is that, well, Kentucky Owl has never been one to shy away from collaborations that bear really interesting types of whiskey blends. This one specifically is a blend between the master distiller from Kentucky Owl, John Rea, and the Lewis McGuane from JJ Corey Irish Whiskey. And I guess I'm assuming the elevator pitch for this one is what if we made a bourbon, but it was done in the style of Irish whiskey? And I guess if you think about it, that's really not that uncommon if you think about like Metallica doing a cover of Whiskey in the Jar, which is a great cover, by the way. Now, the Kentucky Owl St. Patrick's Day was a limited release of just 1 year so far. They didn't release it this year. And it is a blend of a 4 to 8 year old bourbon that were picked out jointly by the two master distillers. And it has an ABV of, it's got an ABV of 100 proof, so 50%. And the mash bill on it that we know, since it is a bourbon, is at least 51% corn. But there's an undisclosed amount of rye and malted barley, but I definitely do pick up a lot of rye on the nose, which is something that I really like. So yeah, and also it's aged in new charred oak barrels, and it is from Kentucky, albeit with a heavy Irish accent. All right, so after getting a real good nose on this one, I would say that it's not particularly powerful, although there is an understated maturity to it, which seems really easier to fustigate in bourbon than it does in typical Irish whiskey. There's not any smoke to it, but you do get a lot of like vanilla and, like I said, rye spice, maple and corn syrup and nutty wood, but it does maintain its core bourbon characteristic. But there is for sure a hint of an Irish accent speaking through. So on the nose, this one's actually it's okay, right? It's not amazing, but it's pretty good. And it is definitely a bourbon, right? You're not going to mistake it for an Irish whiskey. you know what? But it's much more understated than the typical bourbon, even for some of those bourbons that are at the same ABV level, like at 50%, like maybe like a Midwinter's Night Dram, which also kind of reminds me of this one. But for me, I really like a powerful nose on a whiskey, and I kind of expect a lot more sweetness and ABV up front than I'm getting on this Kentucky Owl, the St. Patty's edition. Also, I kind of like more brashness, right? I really like it to be more bold and brash, and this is just a little more understated. Now, the one thing that I do really like on the nose here is the complexity that is swimming around in there. So there is a complexity to it. Not, it's not applied calculus, but there is some complexity to it that I think is going to make it really interesting on the palate. But so for this one on the nose, I'm going to give it 3 out of 6 points. All right, so let's move on to the palate and see if the mouthfeel gets any more interesting and kind of makes up for what I would consider sort of its shortcomings on the nose. Let's get a sip here. The palate is much, much, much more Irish than I got on the nose. There is definitely that upfront kind of crumbly, buttery sweetness, like a shortbread. Wow, that's really good. And it does have a palate that is similar, most similar, I think, to the Blue Spot, more than like I had thought on the Listal. Yeah, definitely more Blue Spot. Wow. Now, while I'm tasting this, let's talk a little bit more about the price for this bottle. And again, it was last year, so I don't know what the price on it would be with the new inflation, but we got this one specifically from Costco. It was priced at $89.99 with a Costco item number of 1643554. And I haven't seen it again this year at Costco, but I still do see it linger around like Total Wine and Bevmo for around $119.99. And interestingly enough, this isn't even the wildest of the combinations and collaborations that Kentucky Owl has come out with. They are obviously known for their batches, like batch 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. We have a bottle of batch 4, which is great. It tastes like a dill monster, which I really enjoy. But you know what? They also came out later on, after this one came out, with this Kentucky Takumi, which is also kind of in the same light. It is a similar prospect in the sense that they are trying to make bourbon, but with a Japanese perspective on it, which is also still pretty wild. So we are going to try this one here at some point in the future, especially because this one's decent. I'm definitely curious to see how this combination comes out as well. So after getting a bit more on the palate here, it actually seems that despite being a true bourbon, right, from a great bourbon maker, from a great bourbon house, and having Kentucky literally in its name, it actually does come off more as an Irish whiskey, doing an American accent, than the opposite way around. So sort of more like Dylan McDermott, or maybe it's Dermot Mulroney. Either way, the bourbon really seems to start to shine through on the mid range where you start to get that real thick, leathery vanilla sweetness that is much more of a bourbonerific kind of flavor that kicks in. And also in the finish, where the combination of the two perspectives of whiskey really, really pay off in this one. So the real point where this collaboration pays off is in the mid range, to where it transitions from the mid range to the finish, because that is where you start to see a lot of the complexity of the two distillers' perspective on whiskey coming through. It's that blend that creates a super interesting level of syncope where the shortcomings of the Irish whiskey, its subdued sweetness and pastry like richness, give way to bourbon's kind of over the top southern charm and pecan pie filling levels of sweetness and heftiness that really hit that sweet spot of having both of them together. Often one of my biggest critiques of Irish whiskeys, at least the ones that I've had so far, is they oftentimes kind of fall off a bit at the end. They don't have the carry through the same way that classic bourbons do. But with this one, there is that complex mid range and strong finish that maybe starts to speak more an Irish brogue, but ends up with an American accent, just like Tom Cruise in that movie Far and Away. All right, so let's talk about the palate score on this one. So, on the palate, I was super duper surprised about how much Irish influence is playing on the bourbon. It does seem to really work. I was much more impressed with the palate than on the nose. So, for the palate score, I want to give this one 10 out of 15 points. But the finish is where this one just really seems to shine, right? Because the finish is long, it is sweet, it is robust, and it is exactly what I like in any type of whiskey that I drink. Also, as a side note, it seems to be the hardest thing to get right on most whiskeys at really any level. So for the finish, I am going to give it a 7 out of 9 points. Now, of course, don't take my opinion for it, but if you want someone who has an amazing taste in whiskey, so in men, let's see what the wife has to say about this. Wife score.
It's not so bourbony.
You want to try blue spot to it? All right, let's try a little bit of this blue spot side by side in comparison.
What's the ABV on a blue spot?
It's like 50, 58.9.
Oh, blue spot, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Try it.
Let me try that. Oh, that is damn good.
1 for the palate, whole point for the palate, and half a point from the finish.
All right, so there you have it, folks. The Kentucky Owl St. Patty's edition. On the nose, here's the blue spot, yes. On the nose, I gave it 3 out of 6 points. And on the palate, I gave it 10 out of 15 points. And then on the finish, which is something that I really like, I gave it 7 out of 10 points. But with the wife score on there, subtracting 1.5, it ends up at 18.5 points, which is still a pretty decent score for a whiskey that undoubtedly is, a money grab. So overall, I can see why this whiskey has sat on the shelf at Costco for such an extended period of time, and it's still kind of floating around at Total Wine, even though it was yearly release last year, because it is okay, right? It's pretty good. But it's a perfect example of how the messaging can be sort of confusing and sort of cheesy and very like money grabby. Try to capitalize on Americans' zeal for anything that is Irish in the first half of March, myself included. But obviously, Kentucky Owl. I mean, obviously they learned their lesson because they didn't put out another one of these, although they did put out one of these, which we'll get to another time. I did buy it, so I don't know if I learned my lesson. But in the long run, I think that it could be a situation that actually makes this whiskey more valuable and sought after because it was a failure than because of its successes. So I am still happy I got it. It'll be good to try it out and enjoy it, whenever I decide to. All right, so that's a review of the Kentucky Owl Bourbon. I hope you really enjoyed this video. And if you do, if you like the wanders, if you like the hauls, the reviews, and really all the amazing stuff we got cooking up for you, and we got tons more cooking up for you, don't forget to like and subscribe because it really does help out the channel to grow, and we're super appreciative about that. It's great for your whiskey mojo. It pleases the whiskey gods, and you get notifications when our newest videos come out on Sundays and sometimes in between. Now, just remember, if you do find a whiskey that you love, just buy it. Because if you don't, somebody else, maybe stupidly, surely will. And it might even be me. All right, everybody, have a great rest of your week. Happy St. Patrick's Day in advance. And I'm out, and adios.